It's like my video is out there, and it's like, who knows me? But in any case, I'm really so excited and honored to be able to say that we made this happen. And I don't know if there are any if there's any community leadership over there that was part of this. Is there anybody there from leadership today?
Our principal is here, our school director, Jessica Hutchison. That's it.
Oh, Hutch.
Hutch.
Oh.
Hi.
So we made this happen.
I am glad we're making this happen too.
Okay, so what I want to do is I want to go through the next 2 hours. It's going to be jam-packed. There's a lot of stuff to go over. And I want to go through, oh, by the way, let me introduce myself. More formally, my name is Jeff Goldstein. I'm the Center Director for the National Center for Earth and Space Science Education, and I created and oversee the Student Spaceflight Experiments program. And I think it's really important, as long as it doesn't kill me, for me to be giving these 2-hour professional development Skypes for the teams in all 34, actually 33 Mission 14 communities, because I think when you hear from the program director what the roles and responsibilities and expectations are and how the program works, that says a lot. So, so what I wanted to do today is go through a series of 4 chapters. The first is, what is the foundational philosophy of approach that gives rise to this program? That's incredibly important. The second piece, the second chapter, how does this program work and how does it grow from that foundational philosophy? The third piece is walking through the curriculum on microgravity and doing it in a way where I'm modeling best teaching practices, so I will take on the role of you, and you're going to take on the role of your students, and you'll get to see how at least I would do this in a classroom to get students moving. And the fourth chapter is an overview of the resources on the website, which is pretty robust because it has to support not only the 33 communities for Mission 14 like yourselves, but we just had 41 experiments come back from space 2.5 weeks ago for Mission 13. So the website has to support 38 Mission 13 communities, Mission 12 communities, and those communities that are looking to come aboard for the next flight opportunity next September, Mission 15. So it's got to be a website for a lot of different stakeholders. So I will show you what to concentrate on in terms of resources so that you can concentrate on facilitating microgravity experiment design in the classroom. Now, I'm looking at the implementation plan, Tammy, and this is a grade 5 through 12 effort on LCO. And so it's a broad grade range. And so how many of you are classroom teachers? Almost everybody. So how many of you feel comfortable right now getting in front of your class and facilitating microgravity experiment design in that classroom? Raise your hands high. How many of you feel a little apprehensive about doing that? So one of the chief objectives of what we're going to do today is for me to address that issue. So first of all, let me start off with this chapter 1, the philosophy of approach. And let me tell you that, you're looking at a fuzzy-headed astrophysicist against a bunch of rockets. So you don't know where I'm coming from with all this. Just to give you a relevant background, my PhD is in astrophysics and my specialty is planetary atmospheres, but I've spent most of my professional career over these last many years in national STEM education for the last 30 years. And that's before STEM as an acronym was even on the scene. I'm routinely called upon to give keynote addresses at educator conferences. And one in particular that was very memorable was the keynote address for the National Science Teachers Association National Conference. And I addressed 6,000 teachers of science. And what they asked me to talk about is what I thought science and STEM education ought to look like in the 21st century. So that's my background from the vantage point of what I'm going to say. And you may not agree with everything I say, but this is where the program comes from. So first of all, how many of you are parents? Raise your hands high. Nobody's, oh, okay, all right, so yes, and I'm a parent too. And I think I speak for all us parents when I say that there was this magic time when our children were first capable of expressing themselves. And we know that's when the unending stream of questions begins. As soon as we're capable of asking questions, we ask them, and we ask them all the time. And so what that's really saying is something about what it means to be human. We are born curious, we are born to explore, we are born to ask questions. And the way that we say that as educators is we humans are born inquiry-based learners. And we also remember as parents that time when we watched our infants poking their corner of the universe, their world. They would poke it every time they could, and we would take videos of that interaction. And they would explore near versus far and up versus down and color and texture. And the act of poking their world was the act of demanding data and evidence in return that they could interpret. They're building a cause and effect library. If I do this, the world is going to respond a certain way. And that allows them to understand how the world works and how they interact with the world, and even how they can successfully interact with the world, because we know that infants will do something, touch something that has an adverse response, and they know that they won't do that again. In education, we say that we're born evidence-based learners. So taken together, we humans are born inquiry-based, evidence-based learners. That's how we explore. That's how we learn. That's how we're programmed to move through our world every day of our lives. And on the frontiers of human exploration, where the professionals live, and it doesn't matter what human endeavor that you're talking about, they are doing inquiry-based, evidence-based learning. A chef that wants to create a new savory dish starts with the gift of a question. Like, I wonder if rosemary is called for in this dish. And as an aside, as soon as a student or a learner, no matter what age, asks the gift of a question, it defines a journey for them, a personal journey. And more pragmatically, it defines for them a problem to be solved. So the chef will say, I wonder if rosemary is good for this dish. And so they, in response to that question, they add rosemary, and then they taste it. And their palate is flooded with data and evidence. And they interpret that data and they say, oh, I don't think rosemary was right, let me try sage. And they try it again. That is inquiry-based, evidence-based learning. In fact, we call the process of inquiry-based, evidence-based learning the scientific method, which has nothing to do with science. It's how humans learn in every discipline. And we teach the scientific method typically very badly as a rigid recipe to follow, as opposed to an art form that is unique and personal to the learner, which in its most general form is asking the gift of a question and framing a pathway to an answer. That's the scientific method. Many scientists won't even put forward a hypothesis because they don't want to bias their thinking. They might just want to poke the world and see what happens. And in the case of our discipline that we're talking about here, which is STEM, on the frontiers of human exploration in STEM live professional scientists and engineers. And if you ask them, what do you get paid to do? They will tell you, we're in the business of asking lots of questions. We get paid to ask questions. We're in the curiosity business. They're professional inquiry-based learners. And they'll also tell you, we're in the business of poking our world. We're in the business of looking at our world and securing data and evidence that we can interpret so we can understand how the world works. They're professional evidence-based learners. So from birth to the frontier, on those two extremes, you've got inquiry-based, evidence-based learning. One way to say it are scientists and engineers are kids that never grew up. Or another way to say it is that humans are born scientists and engineers. And as I said, it really has nothing to do with science with regard to how we learn as inquiry-based, evidence-based learners. It's in every discipline. So the first, let me pause here a second. Does everybody see the construction of this philosophy that I've just started? Does that make sense to you? Okay, so heads are shaking. That's good. Coffee sip. Okay, so now, here is the really powerful and fundamental part of this storyline that affects all of us. Between birth and the frontier, we insert the formal education pipeline, you. And we bring our students in as master explorers into the pre-K side of that pipeline. They already know how to do inquiry-based evidence-based learning. We can nurture it, but they know how to do inquiry-based evidence-based learning. We bring them into the pipeline, we move them through the pipeline, and then we dump them out into the real world. And we hope that formal education systems like school districts, which are bound by national, state, and local standards, we hope that those education systems are smart enough to realize that what we should do is recognize the innate explorer in our students, because that's what it means to be human, recognize the skill sets associated with that innate learning, and use the formal education pipeline to nurture all of those skill sets so that when they go into the real world, they are more refined explorers ready for the real world. And if you ask, what are the skill sets associated with inquiry-based evidence-based learning, how humans learn? Well, first and foremost, it's ownership and learning. The learning experience needs to be owned by the student, not the teacher. If a teacher gets up in front of a class and provides this unending stream of content as a unidirectional flow to the students, and we simply think that our students ought to be content sponges, taking lots of notes, and hopefully they'll be able to regurgitate that back on a test, that is not learning. That is not exploration. That is shutting down curiosity. It's beating the curiosity out of our students. And the way that I like to say this is we always have to remember as educators, it is the student's classroom, not the teacher's classroom, and the teacher lights the way. And we as educator artists, teaching is an art, as teacher artists, we have to make sure that we allow the students to retain ownership in their journey. And so ownership in learning is really, really important. The other critical skill sets necessary for this innate human learning are critical thinking, problem solving, and here's a really important one when it comes to problem solving, the ability to navigate an interdisciplinary content landscape in order to secure the core knowledge necessary to solve a problem at hand. So whenever there's a problem to be solved, the learner has to be capable of going across this content landscape and saying, to solve this problem, I need this, and I need that content, and I need that content. And then the other thing too for inquiry-based evidence-based learning is often, it's a very high priority, the ability to communicate one's ideas and thoughts to others, both written and orally, and also collaboration, because typical exploration is usually not done as an individual, as an island. It's a collaborative effort. And so here's what's, I think, really important about what I'm saying here. Is the education system going to simply look at education where we keep throwing fish at our students, all of these different kinds of fish, and we ask them to memorize all the fish that we've been throwing them? And then we say, okay, here's an exam, tell us the fish that we threw at you. Or is the education system about teaching our students how to think? One is content-driven, one is process-driven, and that process-driven approach grows organically from what it means to be human. So does everybody understand that philosophy that we're talking about? Does anybody have any questions? Again, you might not agree with what I'm saying, but this is the philosophy from which this program grows. And I'm a strong advocate for this philosophy on a national level because I think many of our school districts do look at teaching to the test and content as primary. So now let me ask another question here. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but let's see what you say. And there's no wrong answer, but this is a really, really important question to ask. In every industry, the people who are engaged in that industry really ought to ask, what is the function, the purpose of my industry? Every once in a while they should ask that question to make sure that the industry doesn't go off in a direction that makes no sense. So let me ask this more formally to you. What is the goal of formal education? That pipeline, when our kids get into pre-K level and they're in classrooms and then they leave. What is the goal of formal education? We all need to ground ourselves in that, because that's why we do what we do as professional educators. So while I'm taking my sip of coffee, anybody have any ideas?
Well, I think to make them informed citizens and contributing citizens to the world.
So you're looking at it from the vantage point of entering into society as a contributing member of society. I would say that that grows from the formal objective, the main objective of formal education. It's not the objective in and of itself. I agree with you, but I don't think it's the objective. Anybody else want to throw something out?
Employability.
Employability. Let me say it a little bit differently, because that's exactly right, but let me say it a little bit differently so that it's a little bit of a broader concept. They move into the education pipeline